It's painful that my sister can't have children. But why does mother force my wife to suffer the same fate? The absurdity is beyond comprehension. My mother will never see the face of her grandchild. My sister and I are 3 years apart, but my mother has always treated her like a spoiled little child. I suppose that's why she has become so spoiled, even at her current age. She's now 27, and I'm 30. My wife and I are expecting a baby. We've been married for 2 years, together for 5, and we're very excited about becoming parents. We found out about the pregnancy a couple of months ago and decided to tell our families first before making a big announcement. My wife's family was extremely happy for us, but, of course, my mother had to find something negative about it. My father congratulated us and left it at that, but my mother decided to call me a few hours after we told her about the pregnancy to tell me that she didn't think going through with the pregnancy was a good idea. I was really shocked because my mother loves kids, and I knew for sure that she had been very excited about the idea of being a grandmother, both at my wedding and at my sister's wedding. So, this reaction was quite unexpected. When I asked her why she would say such a thing, she started making up arbitrary reasons why we shouldn't have a baby at this time. She told us it would be a financial strain on us and even mentioned that since both of us were career-oriented, it would be problematic to decide who would stay home with the baby when we both had to go back to work. I told her that we had already thought about those things and that we had enough savings to take care of a baby since we've been working for a long time. It's not like we were improvising. My wife and I work at the same company, and we both have paid maternity and paternity leave. Plus, when we need to go back to work, we had already thought about hiring nannies or asking for help from family. None of the reasons she gave seemed sufficient to get rid of a pregnancy, and I knew there was something she wasn't telling me. So, I kept pressing until she finally told me the truth, and, of course, it turned out that all of this was about my sister. Apparently, my dear sister had been planning to get pregnant this year as well, but unfortunately for her, it hadn't happened yet. She was already quite upset about that, and my mother felt that it wasn't the right time for us to have a baby because if we started our pregnancy process at the same time as hers, it would be emotionally draining for her. The thing is, my sister and I don't get along. We used to fight a lot when we lived together, and when I started university and moved out, it was a big relief for both of us. Since we don't get along, I don't care much about what she thinks about certain things, with my wife's pregnancy being one of them. If she can't handle the fact that we're pregnant and she's not, that's her problem and not something I have to deal with. But, of course, my mother loves to make my sister's problems everyone's issue. So, I told my mother that it was sad my sister hadn't gotten pregnant yet, even though she had apparently been planning it, but that I wasn't going to get rid of my wife's pregnancy just to spare her feelings. That was an absurd suggestion, and I told her that, for her sake, I was going to pretend she never said it so I could still respect her as a member of my family. However, instead of backing down and letting it go, she decided to push further and started telling me that my sister had been planning to get pregnant for a long time, and she and her husband had been trying, but it just hadn't worked. The news of my wife's pregnancy was going to devastate her, so I needed to be mindful of her feelings and not go through with the pregnancy because it would divide the family. The most concerning thing about all this was that my mother actually thought this was a valid suggestion. That I should get rid of my wife's pregnancy just because my sister would feel hurt. I knew there was no point in arguing with her, so I just said, okay, and hung up. But I only did that because I didn't want to prolong that conversation. I had no intention of doing what she asked. After that, I blocked her everywhere and even told my father what had happened. He apologized on my mother's behalf and told me he would make sure she didn't try to contact me again. So, that's how I handled the situation, and since then, my father has kept his promise and has kept my mother from contacting me. For the past 4 months, we've had no contact, and life has been pretty peaceful. We then decided to make a public post on social media announcing our pregnancy because we thought it was finally time to tell everyone, and that's how my sister found out. I don't regret making that post because we wanted to share our happiness with everyone, and we did. If that upset my sister, tough luck for her. And I know it did upset her because, a few days ago, she and my mother decided to show up at my house to talk about our family and how we were going to move forward after everything that had happened. To be honest, I never really considered my sister part of my family because she never behaved that way toward me. As I mentioned before, we were never close. After we stopped living together, there was nothing forcing us to stay in touch, so we didn't get involved in each other's lives. We only saw each other at parties during the holidays, and we even invited each other to our weddings, but it was more out of obligation. I was very direct about all this, so I told my sister that I didn't really consider her close or part of my family, so I didn't think it was important to tell her that my wife was pregnant. I also knew for sure that if she had gotten pregnant first, she never would have bothered to tell me first, and I would have found out through social media when she finally decided to post it. As for my mother, I told her that she had made her bed, and now she had to lie in it because what she had said to me when I shared the news of our pregnancy was horrible, and I didn't want that negativity in my life. I told them that even if they were there to apologize and make amends, it would take me time to process everything. I wasn't going to forgive them right then and give them a second chance. I was brutally honest with them because I didn't have the patience to deal with them at that moment. After I finished speaking, my sister broke down in tears and started sobbing in the living room. That surprised me a bit because I didn't think it would affect her so much, given that we had never been close, and I didn't understand why she expected me to be fake and nice to her. My mother comforted her, and she was the one who told me that recently, after planning and trying to get pregnant for almost a year and a half, they came to the conclusion that my sister was dealing with infertility. The doctors couldn't find the cause of why she couldn't get pregnant, and they just had to wait. It was disappointing because, in her mind, she was ready to be a mother, but physically, it wasn't possible at that moment. She had broken down when she found out, which happened a couple of weeks ago, and then I posted about my wife's pregnancy. That upset her even more for two reasons. The first reason was that, despite trying, she couldn't get pregnant, and here we were celebrating our first pregnancy. Of course, that made her feel bitter and resentful. The second reason was that she had to find out that her own brother was going to be a father through social media, since I didn't contact her in person to tell her. That made her realize how we had grown apart due to our personal differences, and now she wanted to try to make amends. I softened a bit after that, but I still managed to stand my ground. I told them that I appreciated them coming all the way here to try to fix things with me, but I still needed time to process everything and decide if I wanted to give our relationship a chance or not. I also told them that I truly regretted that my sister was infertile and that I hoped she would eventually be able to get pregnant. But at that moment, it was impossible for me to prioritize my family because the only thing that mattered to me was my wife and the pregnancy. Everything else could be dealt with later. I didn't have the emotional capacity to deal with both my sister and my mother at the same time, so I asked them to leave and told them I'd think about everything and contact them later. But for now, I thought it was best to leave things as they had been for the last few years. I thought I was being quite fair because I really didn't have the capacity to deal with the two of them, knowing that there was a lot of friction between us. I wasn't in the mood to pretend that everything was happy. Even if they had apologized, what my mother had said was horrible, and my sister had also been very distant from me in recent years. Fixing our relationship would require a lot of work, and I wasn't willing to make that effort right now, especially since my wife was pregnant and I wanted to prioritize her. So, I thought it should be obvious, but both of them were offended and started calling me selfish, saying that I was being narcissistic by refusing to forgive them and pretending to be too busy for them. To be honest, the reason I wanted them to leave quickly was because I had to take my wife to the doctor for a regular checkup, and I didn't want to be late. So, I wasn't pretending to be too busy, I was really too busy for them. When they got offended, I got angry too because I really didn't think I had said anything to make them act that way. I thought I was being perfectly reasonable and had also been quite polite with them. By arguing with me at that moment, they were also making me late for my wife's doctor's appointment, so I didn't even want to argue with them. I just kept asking them to leave, and I didn't even deny any of the things they were accusing me of, though I really didn't think I was being selfish. But then they said that they just wanted to be part of my child's life, and now, because of my terribly selfish and arrogant behavior, my child would be deprived of the love of an aunt and grandmother. My sister told me that I wasn't just doing harm to my wife, but also to my future children, by refusing to forgive them and trying to give our relationship a second chance due to my huge ego. The implication that I was going to do something that wasn't good for my child was really insulting, and that's when I got offended and responded immediately. First of all, I really don't think their involvement in my child's life is going to make any difference because my baby is going to be loved regardless. Secondly, I really don't think that not allowing them to be part of my child's life is such a bad thing because, a couple of months ago, my mother had literally been telling me to get rid of the baby just so her daughter could have her moment and not be overshadowed by anyone. As for my sister, she has been horrible enough to me in the past that I don't want to forgive her now. Due to the way they reacted, I was even more convinced that I was doing the right thing by deciding not to forgive them and not allowing them to be part of my baby's life. If they had been decent people with any common sense, they would have respected it when I told them I wasn't ready to forgive them and that I needed time to think things over. But they decided to force their decision on me and started making me the villain just because they weren't ready to accept the fact that they might not be involved in my baby's life, which, to be honest, was their fault. After that, the argument escalated, and my wife had to step in. Up until that point, She had stayed in her room because she really didn't have the energy to deal with my mother, my sister, and the drama they were causing. So, she had asked to stay out of it because I didn't want her to be stressed. But everything got so loud and confrontational that she finally had to come out of her room to ask my mother and sister to leave. That really upset me because the last thing I wanted was for my wife to get upset and stressed, and that's exactly what they did. I felt really bad for her, and I was extremely angry at my mother and sister. So, I decided to respond to them once and for all, and I think I said something I can't take back, which makes me feel very bad. They were yelling at me because of my wife's request for them to leave, calling me selfish, telling me that I was letting my ego get in the way of a happy family, and that my child was going to be very unfortunate for having a narcissistic father like me. I said that at least I was going to be able to have a child, which is more than I can say for my sister. I knew for sure that she had only come here because she knew she was infertile, and now she wanted a relationship with her future niece or nephew so she could act like a parasite and try to sneak in as a mother, which is just pathetic. And I told my mother that the only reason she was here was to encourage her daughter's delusions. I said that she was an even bigger failure as a mother than my sister because, despite having 2 children, she had failed to be there for either of us, and all of this was her fault. My words really shook them, and they both left immediately afterward, not without hurling a series of insults at me. Even my wife was quite shocked by the things I said. She told me she didn't necessarily disagree with what I had said, but at that moment, it must have been very painful for them to hear it. Of course, I feel terrible for having said all of that because I'm really not the type of person who enjoys hurting others. But I felt like I had to say something because they were making me out to be the bad guy, and I didn't want them to get away with it. So, am I the bad guy for responding to my mother and sister, mentioning my sister's infertility, and telling my mother she failed to raise both of her children? Update 1. I had that fight with my mother and sister about 3 days ago, and since then, the only people I've spoken to about it are my wife and my father. Both of them pretty much have the same opinion, which is that what I said was a bit harsh and definitely a bit extreme, but given the context of what was happening, it was totally justified. I said it in the heat of the moment, and it's enough that I feel bad about it, but I don't need to apologize because it's not like my mother and sister have apologized to me for anything they said. They are the ones truly responsible for the fight. If they had left when I asked them to, none of this would have happened. But they decided to stay and argue with me, pushing me to my limit, which is why I ended up saying those things. It's a big relief to me that the people I care about the most don't think I'm the bad guy for saying those things, though I do feel bad for having said them. After they left, I'm not sure if my sister said anything about me, but I know for sure that my mother has been ranting about me for days since that fight happened. She's been talking nonstop to my father, and he's been defending me the whole time, which I really appreciate. But that's only made my mother angrier because she thinks my father is encouraging my bad behavior. I don't understand how she doesn't realize that this is exactly what she's been doing with my sister forever, and probably the reason my sister is the way she is. She thinks I owe both her and my sister a big apology because they were just trying to be there for me, and I made them out to be the villains for no reason. It's funny because I feel the same way about them. So, I guess at this point, it's just her word against mine. Anyway, the most important thing is that they're not going to get any apology from me because they totally deserved what they got. If they hadn't pushed me, I wouldn't have exploded at them, and it's that simple. Like I said, my only priority is going to be my wife, and I'm going to try not to let these insignificant things bother me from now on. Update 2. It's been just over a week since I had that fight with my mother and sister. I was trying to keep everything private, only talking to my father and my wife about it, but it seems like they didn't want to respect that. They decided to go public and post something about me on their social media, where they only mentioned the things I said but didn't mention the context in which I said them. I'm not joking. There was just one paragraph where they mentioned the comments I made, but there was absolutely nothing about what they said or what led to the fight in the first place. Of course, after that, I started getting calls and messages from the rest of the family telling me that it wasn't right for me to make such comments against my family and that they expected better from me. Many even asked if it was true because they refused to believe that I was capable of saying such things. I was in shock that they had posted that. Before contacting them, I decided to speak to my father about it, and he told me that even he was surprised that the two of them had done this. He had been trying to reason with them to remove the post but hadn't had any luck so far. I was furious that they had done that, so I decided to take matters into my own hands. After talking to my wife, I decided to post what really happened that day. I didn't deny the fact that I had said the things my mother and sister accused me of, but I also put it in the context of what really happened so at least everyone else would understand. If they were going to seek sympathy from others, I would make sure that at least people knew the whole truth. I talked about their visit, what my mother had said to me about my wife's pregnancy a few months ago, and what really led to the fight that day. After I made my post and people started reading it, they began to comment in my support. Many people reached out to say that they had been quick to judge me and were sorry, but now that they knew the whole truth, they weren't sure which side to support. That's fine with me because I know what I did was nowhere near as bad as what they did. I didn't even need people to be on my side. If I had wanted sympathy from everyone, I would have been the first person to post. The only reason I decided to clear things up was that I didn't want unnecessary hate coming our way. But I don't think my mother and sister understand that concept. It's been a couple of days since we both posted our respective versions, and they've been accusing me of being an attention-seeking egomaniac, which really describes them more than me. They think what they did didn't justify the kind of reaction they got from me, and they believe my statements were outrageous regardless of the context. But I don't think the rest of the family sees it that way. Anyway, I'm happy that I was able to share my side of the story. Update 3. It's been a couple of days since my last update, and today, when I checked my messages on social media in the morning, I noticed that many people had told me that my mother and sister had deleted their posts about what happened. I guess they started receiving a lot of backlash from the rest of the family, which forced them to take that decision. I don't think anyone was buying the narrative they were trying to push, that I was just seeking attention and sympathy, which is why I posted something in my defense. Everyone else also agreed that although what I said was wrong, it was somewhat justified given the circumstances. They couldn't handle the pressure, so they decided to delete their posts, and to me, it felt like a big victory. I haven't removed mine yet because I want to keep it up for a few more days, just in case they try to do something funny. Another interesting thing happened a couple of days ago. Shortly after I posted my version of events, my brother-in-law decided to message me. Since I'm not very close with my sister, I'm not close with her husband either, so we haven't really spoken much. It was a pleasant surprise when he reached out to me and said that he knew his wife was never going to apologize to me, and up until now, he didn't think she had any reason to because he had only heard her side of the story. But now that he had read mine, he no longer knew what to believe. He asked me not to talk about this with anyone and to keep it between us, but in case what I was saying was really true, he wanted to apologize on behalf of his wife. Ever since she found out she would be dealing with infertility for a long time and that a natural pregnancy without IVF wouldn't be possible, she's been quite sensitive. It was clear from the tone of his message that he was going through a lot, and I truly felt sympathy for him. So I told him that it was fine and that I was very glad he at least reached out to apologize. He seems like a genuinely nice guy. I don't know how he ended up with my sister, but I've honored my promise and haven't spoken to anyone about this until now. Well, except here, but I don't think that breaks the promise. Update 4. It's been a couple of weeks since my last update, and I recently decided to delete my post. I felt that it had been up long enough and that by now, everyone knows the truth. I also thought I didn't need to punish my mother and sister more than they're already being punished because who they are as people is bad enough. I spoke to my father a few days ago, and he told me that my sister and her husband are in the process of divorcing. Ever since she found out about her fertility issues, she's been acting completely crazy. She was always overly spoiled, entitled, and honestly a little unbalanced, but recently she'd reached intolerable levels. Apparently, she'd become very toxic, and her husband had done his best to tolerate it, but after a recent argument, he just couldn't take it anymore. So she moved back into my parents' house, and since then, it's been constant drama at my dad's place. I feel bad for him. Of course, my mother is making sure her daughter doesn't feel bad and has been blaming her husband for everything that's gone wrong, reinforcing the belief that my sister can never be wrong about anything. Honestly, my heart breaks for my dad having to deal with all of this. I also felt a bit sorry for my sister because she recently found out she won't be able to have children, and now her husband is leaving her. The second part is definitely her fault, but, well, I'm not that cruel, so I decided to delete my post. Still, I'm not going to apologize for anything, and I'm not going to reach out to them because I'm pretty sure they haven't changed. My father has even been telling me that there's a lot of the "it should have been me and not my brother" mentality going around the house regarding the pregnancy. So I think it's best to keep our distance from each other. As always, my priority is my wife, and as long as she's happy, I'm happy. So I guess you could say that right now, I'm very happy. Update 5. The first thing I want to share is that I'm now a father, and my wife and I have a beautiful, chubby baby boy. Of course, like any parent, I'm not objective, but it's impossible not to see how perfect he is. We're very happy, and honestly, that's the only thing that matters right now. Our families, both my wife's and mine, have been visiting to meet the new addition. Well, almost the entire family, except for my mother and sister. As you can imagine, things between us are still the same, and I have no intention of changing that now that I have my son. My sister, as expected, hasn't shown any interest in the birth of her nephew. I'm not surprised at all. In fact, it's a relief because, honestly, I'd rather not deal with her at this happy stage of my life. From what I've heard, she's been complaining and trying to downplay the baby news, but since she's still living at my parents' house, the only one who has to endure her negativity is my dad. As for us, we haven't been affected in the slightest, and we really don't care what she says or does. Her absence is more of a gift than an offense. My mother, on the other hand, seems to have suddenly remembered that she's my mother and is now also a grandmother. Since the baby was born, she's been insisting that my dad act as a mediator between us so she can have the chance to meet her grandson. But thankfully, my father has stood firm and told her he doesn't want to get in the middle. He knows very well what our response is. She's not going to meet our son. I don't know what she expected after everything she did, especially after suggesting to my wife that she should have an abortion. She said it as casually as if she were proposing a change of restaurant because my sister doesn't like seafood. It was absurd, heartless, and one of the reasons why our relationship will never recover. By now, my mother should understand that certain actions have consequences, but she doesn't seem to want to accept that. As for my sister, I know things aren't going well for her, and honestly, I don't feel any pity. Her divorce was finalized recently, so you can imagine how miserable she is. My father has already told her that she should start looking for a new place to live, and although my mother isn't happy about the suggestion, he wasn't joking. It seems that my father is finally reaching his limit. After putting up with her at home, he now believes that enough is enough. I can't imagine what it's been like for him to endure her attitude now that things aren't going her way. So, that's it. I've tried to keep this brief so I can get back to my son.